Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to unravel the incredibly complex story of globalization. And we're going to start with something you're probably wearing right now, your clothes.
Right, let's just dive straight in by looking at where our stuff, especially our clothes, actually comes from. Because, behind every single t-shirt, there's a story about our global economy. Okay, take a look at these two factories. On the left, you've got a sweatshop in Guangzhou, China. Workers there are putting in long, hard days. But on the right, that's the American apparel factory in Los Angeles, which is trying to make a profit without underpaying its employees. I mean, they both make clothes, but they tell completely different stories about the world we live in.
That contrast, between a sweatshop and an ethical factory, it really gets you thinking, doesn't it? It brings up this huge question about the hidden journey our clothes take and the human costs that you just don't see on the price tag. So, let's unpack that. Let's explore the global systems that actually create these totally different realities for workers. How did we even end up with a world of manufacturing that's so, well, divided? Well, one of the key drivers here is a word you've probably heard a lot: outsourcing. It's pretty simple, really. To cut costs and stay competitive, a lot of companies in developed nations move their factories to countries where labor is just a whole lot cheaper. And that single idea has shifted millions of jobs across the globe. And this global shift, it has put some serious pressure on labor unions. I mean, historically, unions are the ones who fought for better wages and safer working conditions. But as companies pack up and move jobs overseas, union power, well, it's taken a nosedive. To give you some perspective, in the US, union membership fell from about 35% in the 1950s all the way down to just 12% by 2006. So the heart of this whole debate, really, it all comes down to what we call labor standards. And that's just a way of saying the basic rules and protections that are supposed to keep workers safe from exploitation and make sure their workplace isn't dangerous.
Now, groups like the International Labor Organization, along with protesters and activists, they argue that some things should just be universal. Fundamental principles like freedom from forced labor or the right for workers to organize. But the battle to actually enforce these ideas is ongoing, because some will argue that having really high standards makes a country less competitive.
But here's the thing. All this global awareness doesn't just shine a light on the problems, it also sparks some really powerful responses. And that's led to movements like fair trade, which offer a completely different path forward. Let's use coffee as an example. Think about a typical cup of coffee that costs, say, $1.50. How much of that do you think makes it back to the farmer who actually grew the beans? Just 15 cents.
But now, look what happens under the fair trade model. For that same $1.50 cup, the farmer's share nearly doubles. And that increase can be the difference between just surviving and actually earning a sustainable living and investing back into their own communities. And this right here illustrates a super powerful tool for us as consumers. When you see this logo, it means that product has met specific ethical standards. It actually empowers you to vote with your wallet for a fairer system. You see, fair trade tries to build a more equitable system from the ground up. It's not just about a fair price. It's this whole approach that includes fair working conditions, democratic organization, and direct trade that cuts out a bunch of the middlemen. So the impact of globalization goes way beyond just factory floors and coffee farms. It sends these ripples out that affect the very structure of our societies, often in ways we might not even expect. For example, while globalization has certainly created new opportunities, it hasn't managed to close the gender gap. This cartoon, I think, captures it perfectly. It shows the reality that men and women often face really different paths and different obstacles on their way up the corporate ladder. And the data absolutely backs this up. This isn't just a feeling. In Canada, for instance, back in 2003, women were still earning just over 71 cents for every single dollar earned by men for work of equal value. And these kinds of huge economic gaps, they persist all around the world. And on top of those inequalities, that same trend of outsourcing factory jobs has pushed along this fundamental shift in developed countries, the move from an industrial economy to what we call a knowledge economy. The rules of the game have totally changed. It's not about the big beating the small anymore, it's about the fast beating the slow. And this creates yet another gap between those who have the skills for this new world and those who get left behind. So, after seeing all these different effects, all these ripples, how are we supposed to feel about globalization? Is it a force for good or for bad? As you've probably guessed by now, the answer is, well, it's complicated. One perspective from the writer Inder Goklani is that if you look at the big picture, globalization has been a massive success.
From this point of view, humanity has literally never been healthier, wealthier, or better fed than it is today. But then you have a totally different take from former Canadian Minister Paul Hellyer, who warns that globalization is a moral tragedy. He argues that it's actually chipping away at essential social services, things like healthcare and education, and creating huge amounts of unemployment. And here's a third view from author Naomi Klein, who says globalization creates these fences of social exclusion. She argues that while it definitely connects some of us, it also locks out entire populations from its benefits, leaving them totally behind. So, in the end, there is no simple answer. We've heard the arguments, we've seen the data, we've seen the human stories. And that leaves us with one final, very personal question. The coffee you drink, the clothes you wear, every single day, your choices connect you to this global story. The only question left is, what role are you going to play in it?